Hello everyone, I am Pranavi from ENH iSecure and thank you for joining this demo session about Auth0's custom database authentication and migration strategies. Hope you have gone through the presentation where we have covered the overview of this topic. Now let's quickly dive into the demo. First, let me show you a sample users table structure in the database of my application. Here's my users table structure. ID, email, password, name, nickname, created at, updated at, email verified are the key columns of my table. Now that you have seen my existing user database, let's see how we can use this database for authentication using Auth0. Instead of rebuilding everything from scratch, Auth0 allows us to connect directly to our existing user database. So, let me switch over to our Auth0 tenant where we will set up this integration. This is my Auth0 tenant where I have super admin privileges, so I can show you all the configuration steps we will need for this integration. First, we need to create a database connection in Auth0 that can communicate with our existing database. Let me walk you through those steps. To create a database connection, navigate to Authentication tab and select Database. Here you can view your existing connections. To establish a new connection, click on Create Database Connection. Enter the required connection name and select the appropriate identifier based on your database schema. In this example, I am selecting email address as the identifier. Enable the Use My Own Database toggle to utilize your custom database configuration. Click Create to proceed. Your database connection has been successfully established. To utilize your custom database connection, ensure that the Use My Own Custom Database option is enabled. If you wish to use this database solely for authentication without data migration, verify that Import Users to Auth0 is disabled. Let's configure this database exclusively for authentication purposes. We will address migration scenarios in a future implementation. Custom database functionality is implemented through database action scripts, each serving a specific purpose. Login script is mandatory and executes when a user attempts to log in. This script uses email and password parameters to validate user credentials and authenticate access. Create script is triggered during user registration to handle new account creation in your database. Verify script is activated when users attempt to verify their email addresses following registration. Change password script processes password reset requests when users need to update their credentials. Get user script validates user existence during both password changes and new user creation processes. Delete user script enables direct user deletion from the database to the dashboard interface. Based on your specific database type, you can select from the available predefined templates and customize them with your proper database credentials. Ensure that your database firewall settings and necessary ports are configured to allow connections from Auth0 servers for seamless integration, and also make sure that your tenant is under professional subscription to enable this option. I have successfully configured the database scripts. Given that my database is MySQL and passwords are hashed using Bcrypt algorithm, I am importing the MySQL and Bcrypt.js libraries into the code implementation. To ensure secure connection handling, I am utilizing the configuration object to store connection properties. This object allows you to define the necessary key value pairs for your database connection properties and also implement the appropriate code logic tailored to each script's specific functionality requirements. The scripts can be validated and tested using the Save and Try button, which enables verification of both code logic and database connectivity prior to deployment. Let's look at the sample users details. This is the profile information for our sample user, and I know the password of the sample user. Now let's proceed with testing the login functionality using these details. Let's enter the sample user credentials for testing. The following user profile represents the data retrieved from the database through our implemented login script. This means that our code logic and database connectivity are working properly. We have successfully established a connection between Auth0 and our custom database. To utilize this database connection within your application, ensure that you have created an application in Auth0 through the Applications tab. To activate this database connection for your specific application, navigate to the Application section and enable the connection for your desired application. Now, the connection has been enabled for your application. Now, let's verify that there are no existing users associated with this connection. To do that, go to User Management and click on Users. These are all your existing users. To filter users by connection, click on Connection and enter your desired connection name. As you can see, there are no existing users. Now let's switch to our application and test the database connection using the sample user credentials that we have reviewed during the script testing phase. This is our application, and now let's attempt to authenticate using those credentials. Since the login was successful, we can confidently confirm that our login script is functioning properly. This authentication process should also generate a shadow record within our tenant. Shadow records are user records that are created in Auth0 without storing the actual password, maintaining security while enabling user management and session handling within the Auth0 system. Now, let's look at the user records associated with this connection. Now click on Users again and select Connection from the drop-down. Now let's enter our connection name. As you can see, here is the shadow record that was generated for the user following the successful authentication. Let's switch back to our application. Log out of the current user session to test sign-up functionality of our connection. Click on Login again and choose Sign Up. As the user has been signed up, they should create a user in our database. Let's switch to our database and verify. This confirms that the user record has been successfully created in the database. Now let's examine the user records associated with this connection once again. The newly created user's shadow record has also been created. To prove that these records doesn't contain password information, let's return to our database. Let's delete the newly created user from the database. Let's navigate back to our tenant and let's review the records associated with the connection. We can observe that the shadow records remain unchanged. Now let's return to the application and log out of the current session. Now let's attempt to log in using the credentials of the deleted user. The system returns an error stating that the user doesn't exist. This error can be customized in your login script. This confirms that the shadow records do not store user passwords, as Auth0 must query the original database for authentication, and since the user was deleted from our database, authentication fails despite the shadow record's presence. Now that we have explored authentication using a custom database, let's examine how to import users or migrate user data from a custom database into Auth0. To enable the migration scenario, we need to return to our database configuration. And we need to activate the import users to Auth0 toggle. Before enabling this feature, let's observe that we currently have all database action scripts available. Now let's go back and toggle on the import users to Auth0 option. Now let's notice that only two scripts remain available, the login script and get user script. These scripts serve to verify user existence in the database and authenticate against the database before importing the user into Auth0. Now let's return to the application and register a user to observe how the import feature impacts user records in both Auth0 and our database. Let's go back to the application. Let's click on Login and let's sign up for a user. Now that we have registered a user, let's examine the user records in Auth0 associated with this connection. Let's go back to our tenant. Let's check for users. The newly created user is now reflected in Auth0's database. Now let's switch to our database to verify user creation. The user record was not created in our database because the import toggle is enabled, directing all user registrations to be stored directly in Auth0 rather than in our custom database. Now let's examine a sample user record that exists in our database. Now, using these credentials, let's verify that the user records created when the import toggle is enabled are complete records rather than shadow records. Let's log out of the current user session in our application. And now, let's authenticate using those credentials. As we have logged in successfully, let's navigate back to our Auth0 tenant and observe the newly created user record in Auth0. As you can see, the user record has been created in Auth0. Now to demonstrate that this is not a shadow record, we will delete this user from our database and then let's try to authenticate the user through the application. So let's switch to our database and remove the user record. As we have deleted our user from our database, let's switch to application and authenticate the user again. The user successfully logs in despite being deleted from our database. This confirms that Auth0 now contains a complete user profile with stored credentials rather than just a shadow record that references to the external database. Now let's return back to our tenant. Until now, we have migrated users using automatic migration, which is also known as lazy migration. For bulk user migration, there are two available methods, using the import-export users extension or via the management API endpoint. Let's first examine the user extension process. Navigate to the Extensions tab and locate the user import-export extension. Then click on Install. Once installed, open the user import-export extension. And now select the database connection where you want the users to be created. Upload your users file in JSON format and click on Start importing users. While importing, the import status will be shown as pending. After the import process is completed, return to the users section and now search for users associated with that connection. These are the users that got imported. Now let's verify these imported users with the JSON file. For the proper JSON file structure when performing bulk user imports through Auth0's extension, please refer to this official Auth0 documentation. This guide provides the complete schema requirements you will be needing for your import process. For details on using the Auth0 Management API to create user import jobs, please refer to the official Auth0 API documentation for the Post Users Imports endpoint. This documentation covers the required parameters, request format, and response handling for bulk user imports. Let's use Postman to perform bulk user migration through Management API endpoint. Ensure you have valid Auth0 token with the appropriate scopes to perform this operation. To attach the user's file and request body, go to the body section and select the file option for users and attach your user data file. Additionally, specify the connection ID to designate which connection should be used for importing users into Auth0. Now, send the request and you will receive a response. In this response, you will get the status as pending and you will get the connection details. You will also receive a job ID. This job ID can be used to monitor the import status and track the process of bulk import operation through subsequent API calls. Here, you can see the user's file structure with sample users. Let's verify if the users got imported. Now let's go to users and filter out users based on the connection. As you can see, the users have been successfully imported as part of bulk migration process through Management API endpoint. This concludes our demo session and thank you for participating. I hope you found this session helpful.